In this video, I'm going to be looking at the sources that tell us about the reasons for and the preparations for the invasion by the Persians of Greece in 491. So this is before the Battle of Marathon. There are three source sections we're going to look at: Herodotus 7.152, Herodotus 6.42 to 49, and two inscriptions from Persia. So you'll need to find the relevant sources in your source book. Okay, so we're going to be starting with Herodotus 7.152. So this, remember, Herodotus is known as the father of history or the father of lies, depending. And he is our main source for the Persian War. So I'm going to read through the majority of what these sources tell us, and you can see I've already highlighted some things, and I will explain what the highlighted bits mean. So now, whether it is true that Xerxes sent a herald with such a message to Argos, and that the Argives envoy came up to Susa and questioned Artaxerxes about their friendship, I cannot say with exactness, nor do I now declare that I consider anything true except what the Argives themselves say. So what we do have is, after the Ionian revolt, that we have Xerxes, who is the king of Persia, sending messages out to some different Greek states. So particularly this one is Argos. And obviously Herodotus is pointing out, saying, I'm not sure this is entirely what happened or what true, but I do know what the people from Argos, the Argives, have said. So this, however, I know full well, namely, if all men should carry their own private troubles to market for barter with their neighbours, there would not be a single one who, when he looked into the troubles of other men, would not be gladly to carry home again what he had brought. Fair enough. The conduct of the Argives was accordingly not utterly shameful. That's sort of damning them a faint phrase. For myself, although it is my business to set down what is told to me, to believe it is none at all of my business. This I ask the reader to hold true for the whole of my history, for there is another tale account according to which it would seem that the Argives, who invited the Persian into Hellas, because the war with the Lacedaemonians, who were the Spartans, was going badly, and they would prefer anything to the present distresses. So this is one of the possible reasons why Persia came to Greece, is because the people of Argos, the Argives, for whatever reason, but according to Herodotus, it might be because they had some issue with the Spartans, so they invited the Persians into Greece, which is Hellas, as mentioned here, because basically they want a different type of war, because the war against Sparta is going really badly. Now, Argos and Sparta did have a really bad rivalry in this period, so there might be an element of truth to this, but in reality, having done the summer work and things we talked about in lesson as well, or going to be talking about lesson, it's unlikely that this is the sole reason why Persia came to Greece. It's more likely due to the problems with Ionia. So then we look at some more Herodotus, so we're just carrying it on. So in this year, the Persians caused no further trouble for the Ionians, and at this time certain things happened which greatly benefited the Ionians. Artaphernes, governor of Sardis, summoned ambassadors from the cities and compelled the Ionians to make agreements among themselves that they would abide by the law and not rob and plunder each other. He compelled them to do this, and he measured their lands by parasangs, which is a Persian name for the distance of 30 stadia, and ordered that each people should, according to this measurement, pay a tribute which has remained fixed as assessed by Artaphernes ever since that time up until this day. The sum appointed was about the same as that which they had rendered before. This then kept them peaceable. So remember, one of the reasons why the Ionians had revolted is they were really unhappy with the tribute they were being forced to pay the Persians. So in order to try and keep the peace, we have Artaphernes, who is one of the Persian governors, sort of makes an agreement with them. They still have to pay a tribute, but it's kind of now decided by sort of land measurement instead of any other reason. It works out about the same, but it was slightly less than what they've been paying to the Persians before. And as a result, this keeps the Ionians relatively happy. Because remember, the Ionian revolt had actually failed. It didn't remove the Persians at all. So you have this idea that Persia is trying to keep peace in the Ionian region. But at the very beginning of spring, the other generals were deposed by the king from their offices. Mardonius, son of Gobryas, I think, a man young in years and recently married to Darius's daughter, Artazostra, came down to the coast at the head of a very great army and fleet. So what we're looking for in these sources are sort of things like effects of conflict, so what happens as a result of conflicts, and we're also looking at the causes of conflict. So here we can start to see that there are other reasons why Persia is coming to fight. So in the first source we looked at, up here, is because Argos invited them in. There's issues to do with Ionia, as in the Ionian revolt had been causing problems in Persia, had been dealing with it. And now we have a key individual appearing, this guy called Mardonius. And maybe there's an element of him wanting to impress his new father-in-law. So remember, Darius is the king of Persia, and Mardonius has married his daughter. So perhaps he's trying to prove that he deserves this marriage, that he's important to Darius, and therefore he decides that he wants to fight, maybe to get some glory as well. When Mardonius reached Sicilia at the head of this army, he himself embarked on shipboard and sailed with the rest of his ships, while other captains led the land army to the Hellespont. The Hellespont is a really small gap between what is now Turkey and the top of Greece. If you look on a map, you'll see it. It's a really easy place for the Persians to cross, hence why they always go to the Hellespont. When Mardonius arrived in Ionia in his voyage along the coast of Asia, he did a thing which here I set down for the wonder of those Greeks who did not believe the Ortanes, to declare his opinion among the seven that democracy was best for Persia. Mardonius deposed all the Ionian tyrants and set up democracies in their cities. So this was one of the other reasons why the Ionians had revolted. It wasn't just about tribute, it was also the fact that they had these tyrants who were ruling them really badly. So in order to keep the peace, Mardonius decides to remove the tyrants and set up democracies to keep Ionia happy. This could be seen as a positive effect of conflict because obviously you have now democracy flourishing in the Ionian states. He did this in hurry to the Hellespont. When a great multitude of ships and great army were assembled, the Persians crossed the Hellespont on shipboard and marched through Europe with Eretria and Athens as their goal. So remember, the Persians don't like Athens because they were helping with the Ionian revolt. They led the Ionians with support. So here could be one of the main motives why Persia decides to invade in 491 is because of Athens and their behaviour. So Mardonius lands in Greece, and the rest of the source is going to talk about what happens when Mardonius is in Greece. It should give us some clues of some other motives of why the Persians started to come across, but also gives us quite a lot of effects of conflict for the Persians. So this was the stated end of their expedition, but they intended to subdue as many of the Greek states as they could. So there's idea that they're trying to conquer. There's an element of imperialism here, empire building, and they want to take over as much of Greece as they could. Their fleet subdued the Thasians, who could not so much as lift up their hands against it. Their land army added the Macedonians to the slaves that they had already. For all the nations nearer to them, the Macedonia had been made subject to the Persians before this. So we have the Thasians who are unable to really fight, are subdued really quickly, and the Persians, as a result, get lots of slaves. Crossing over from Thassos, they travel near the land as far as Acanthus, and putting out from there, they tried round to Athos. A lot of these places you'll notice I've not highlighted because, to be honest, we don't really care about them. But a great and irresistible north wind fell upon them as they sailed past and dealt very roughly with them, driving many of their ships upon Athos. Now, one of the key things we look at for the Persian War is why the Persians failed to take over Greece, why they lost the war. And one of our key themes for this particular point is that perhaps that the Persians were unprepared for the Greek land, like literally the terrain, and that there was just some bad luck involved in the Persian War for the Persians. So this is an example of this, where there's this really bad storm and it basically just wrecks a load of ships. And that could be one of the reasons why this early expedition was not very successful. It is said that about 300 ships were lost and more than 20,000 men. So this is very costly for the Persians. So this is, a negative effect of war. It's affected their military. Since the coast of Athos abounds in wild beasts, some men were carried off by beasts and so perished. Others were dashed against the rocks. Those who could not swim perished because of that, and others still by the cold. So there's a real sort of collection of bad things happening to the Persian forces. They've lost loads of ships in the sea because of the storm. Now they're being carried off by wild animals and killed. Others are drowned, and others get hypothermia and die. So it's all going pretty horribly wrong for Mardonius in this initial campaign. Thus it fared with the fleet. As for Mardonius and his land army, while they were encamped in Macedonia, the Berberi of Thrace attacked them by night and killed many of them, wounding Mardonius himself. So again, they have some issues here. They're being attacked by some tribes in Thrace. Mardonius himself is injured. He doesn't die, but he is injured. So they're having some real problems. But not even these could escape being enslaved by the Persians. So these guys were actually enslaved and taken over, but it does show that the Persians are not having a very good time of it in Greece at this particular point. Mardonius did not depart from these lands before he had subjugated them. After conquering them, he led his army away homewards, since the Berberi, I apologise if my pronunciation for key places changes quite a lot, it's because I don't quite know how to say that word, had dealt a heavy blow to his army, and Athos an even greater blow to his fleet. This expedition, after an inglorious adventure, returned back to Asia. So Mardonius fails, okay? He's sort of lent this sort of maybe somewhat exploratory expedition to Greece, hasn't really done very much. He's conquered a few places, but otherwise he's lost a load of ships, he's lost loads of men, and it's a bit of a failure, to be completely honest. So he goes back to Persia. In the next year after this, Darius first sent a message bidding the Thasians, who were falsely reported by their neighbours to be planning rebellion, to destroy their walls and bring their ships to Abdera. Since they had been besieged by Hystaisus of Miletus and had great revenues, the Thasians had used their wealth to build ships of war and surround themselves with stronger walls. And I forgot to highlight something, so I will do that while I'm at it. There we go. Right, so we got some Greek states who were supposed to be, so remember Thasians were conquered in 492 up here somewhere. Where's Thassos? I've lost Thassos. Here it is, from Thassos. So they've been taken over, and now rumours are spreading that they are going to rebel, so they decide the Persians are going to intervene. Importantly, which is why I highlight it, they have a lot of money, so maybe there's an element of the Persians were after wealth, and that's another reason why they decided to come to Greece before the Battle of Marathon. So the revenue from the mainland and from the mines, about 80 talents on average, came in from the gold mines. So they're very, very wealthy. And less from the mines of Thassos itself, yet so much of the Thasians, having paid no tax on the crops, drew yearly revenue from the mainland and the mines, 200 talents on average, and 300 when the revenue was great. So they are wealthy because of this mine. So this could be a reason for Persia coming across. One thing about Herodotus I should warn is he does go off on little tangents, as we will notice in this section. So I myself have seen these mines. By far the most marvellous were those found by the Phoenicians, who with Thassos canonised this island, which is now called after that Phoenician Thassos. These Phoenician mines were called between the place called Anaria and Canarian Thassos, opposite Samothrace. They are great in hill that has been dug up in the searching. So much for that. So that's a really helpful geography lesson from Herodotus there. The Thasians, at the king's command, destroyed their walls and brought all their ships to Abdera. So either way, Thassos does what they're told by Persia, and they continue to be under Persian control. Then Darius attempted to learn whether the Greeks intended to wage war against him or to surrender themselves. He sent heralds this way and throughout Hellas, bidding them demand a gift of earth and water for the king. So earth and water is basically a symbolic surrender. They request it in order to avoid a battle. So he sends loads of heralds throughout Greece in order to basically avoid an actual war by demanding this earth and water instead. He dispatched some to Hellas. He sent others to his own tributary coast cities of the coast, commanding that ships of war transports for horses to be built. So there's preparations here for a war, an invasion. So the city set about these preparations. The heralds who went to Hellas received what the king's proclamation demanded from many of those dwelling on the mainland. So what we have here, hang on, let me just highlight it. There we go, is examples of some Greek states surrendering to the Persians, and it's known as medizing. So these guys, Medais, they become Persian. And from all islands to whom they came in demand. Among the islands who gave earth and water to Darius were the Aegiatians. The Athenians immediately came down upon them for doing this, for the supposed Aegiatians to have given the gift out of enmity for Athens. Basically, Aeginus and Athens don't get on, so Athens thinks they're doing it just to get back at the Athenians. So they might join with the Persians in attacking the Athenians. Gladly laying hold of this pretext, they went to Sparta and there accused the Aegiatians of acting to betray Hellas. So you do have the beginnings of Athens and Sparta maybe beginning to work together against the Persians. But it's mainly Athens does this because they're really angry at Aegina. So now we're going to move on to two Persian inscriptions. So these inscriptions were outside the tombs of the kings of Persia. The wording of them sounds a little bit like a 5-year-old telling you how amazing he is. So they are sort of funny to read, to be completely honest. There's only little bits that we need to highlight. What this does give us is maybe an insight into the Persian viewpoint of themselves, and maybe this could give us clues of why they decided to invade Greece. They are our only Persian sources. Everything else comes from Greek sources. So we need to be aware that what Herodotus is telling us is from the Greek point of view. This is our only insight into the Persian point of view. So we'll start with the first one. So Darius the king says, when Ahura Mazda saw this earth in commotion, he thereafter bestowed it upon me. He made me king. So Ahura Mazda is the most important god within the Persian religion at this time. So we have the idea that the gods are literally giving the earth, the world, to the Persian king. So it's the Persian king's right to control it. So maybe that tells us why they thought they should subdue the Greeks, because it's their right to do so, because the earth has been given to them. By the favour of Ahura Mazda, I subdued it. So I conquer it. So we've got that empire building. They did what I said, as was my desire. If now you should think, how many are the countries with Darius the king held? Look at the sculptures of those who bear the throne, then you will know. Then it will be known to you. The spear of a Persian man has gone far. So the Persian empire is huge. And the Persian sort of history has this continual expansion. So again, this might be part of the reason why the Persians decide to invade Greece. It's because it's what's expected of a Persian king, is to continue to expand the empire, because the spear of the Persian man has gone very far. Then it shall become known to you, a Persian man has given battle far indeed from Persia. Darius the king says, from which has been done all that I did by the will of Ahura Mazda. So the gods are basically sort of commanding him to do so. Ahura Mazda brought me, said, until I had done the work. May Ahura Mazda protect me from harm, my royal house in this land. This I pray of Ahura Mazda, this may Ahura Mazda give me. O man, which is the command of Ahura Mazda, let it not be repugnant to you. Do not leave the right path. Do not rise in rebellion. So there could be maybe an element here of revenge. The Ionians had revolted. The Athenians had helped them. Persia's very unhappy. Don't you dare leave us. You have to stay loyal. So maybe that's another motive for him. The second inscription is a little bit weirder in terms of the wording, and more like this kind of 5-year-old that I was talking about. Ahura Mazda is a great god. He created this excellent work which is seen. He created happiness for man. He bestowed wisdom and courage upon Darius the king. Darius the king says, by the favour of Ahura Mazda, I am such a kind that I am a friend of the right and not a friend of the wrong. It is not my desire that the weak man should suffer injustice at the hands of the strong. It is not my desire that the strong man should suffer injustice from the weak. So you have this idea of the Persians see themselves as sort of rightful rulers, that they look after people who are weak. They don't just go around attacking people for no reason. It's all about justice and in protecting people. I desire what is right. I'm not afraid of the man who follows the lie. I am not hot-tempered, i.e. I don't act just out of spite. The things that develop in me during a dispute I hold firmly under control through my mind. I'm fully in control of myself. It's good to know. I reward the man who seeks to contribute according to his efforts. I punish him who does harm. So again, it's about punishing people who behave badly. So maybe not Ione, but maybe Athens, according to the harm done. I do not wish that a man should do harm, nor that I wish that, should he do harm, he should not be punished. Not should be published? Should be punished, I think. What a man says against a man does not convince me until I hear the testimony of both. It's good, also good to know. I am content with what a man does or brings as tribute for me according to his ability. So that's about that tribute again. So there's the idea that the Persians are after wealth and resources. My pleasure is great, I'm well disposed towards him. Of such kind is my understanding and my judgment. When you shall see or hear what I have done in the palace on the battlefield, this is the willpower of which I possess over my mind and my understanding. That's going to get a bit odd. This indeed is my courage as far as my body possesses the strength. As a commander, I'm a good commander. Immediately, the right decision is taken according to my understanding when I meet a rebel. When I meet someone who is not a rebel at this moment, due to my understanding and judgment, I know that I am above panic when I see a rebel as well as when I see someone who is not a rebel. It's kind of like Donald Trump, isn't it, speaking? It's a bit sort of nonsensical. Anyway. I am trained in my hands and in my feet. As a horseman, I am a good horseman. As a bowman, I am a good bowman, both on foot and horseback. As a spearman, I am a good spearman, both on foot and horseback. So, although the wording is quite funny, and it is literally a 5-year-old going, I'm good at this, and I'm good at this, and on horses I can do this too. What we do have is the idea that the Persian kings see them as very good military leaders, as very powerful, and that could be another motive for why they decide to attack Greece. These are the skills which Ahura Mazda has bestowed upon me, which I have been strong enough to exercise. By the favour of Ahura Mazda, what I have done, I have achieved the skills Ahura Mazda has bestowed upon me. O man, proclaim loud and clear of what kind you are, of what sort your abilities are, and what kind your loyalty is. Let that which has been heard by your ears not seem false to you. Hear that which has been said to you. O man, let that which I have not done seem to you to be false. Observe what the weak man has done. O man, see what I have done, not to overstep, and do not be ill-disposed towards happiness. Fine. So you're getting the gist here of what the Persian king and how they are portraying themselves. So they are strong warriors, they're good commanders, they don't attack people who don't deserve to be attacked, and they always act in the right way.